Rejoice, for I am no longer in the green room. I am now in the yellow room. I did not want to have to make this video. This is not my normal thing, and my normal thing was never a very narrow category. Let me start by saying that I count myself a fairly normal guy, working class. I have a bachelor's degree in history from a not terribly high ranked state university that I don't really use. I love my family, I love my country, I support my friends, I fret over things I can change, I fret over things I can't change. Pretty standard human here. Let me continue by saying I don't have an active YouTube channel and I don't really want one. I don't really care about my subscriber counts. I want you all, truly, to be happy and welcome. When I made a dumb short video with a satirical clickbaity thumbnail suggesting I had some very strong opinions about Star Wars a few months back, and then almost immediately lost 5 subscribers, my reaction wasn't dismay, it was whoops. So I'm sorry if I lose you here, but if I do, I wish you the best of everything. But this is the largest number of people I can reach at once, and this needs to be said. Donald Trump lost the election, and that's okay. I kind of hope this isn't a controversial statement for any of you, but it might be. And I want to be clear, I don't think you're stupid if you believe otherwise. But I do know you're wrong. I hope you'll stick with me here a little bit because I don't want to condescend. I would like you to understand my perspective, but I really do want to understand yours as well. I've been having a harder and harder time of doing that lately. Trump lost, and that's okay. It usually comes down to 2, and one always loses. It's not surprising or unlikely that Trump lost. Let's try to stay apolitical, just basic observable things he had going against him in this race. First off, 2020 was a really bad year. Like, individually, we've all had contenders for our own worst years. But we all recognize 2020 as the worst general one in living memory. Lots of people sad, angry, scared, confused, hurting in more ways than one. And it was an election year. That would suck for anyone in office. Even if Trump had handled everything as well as anyone could have, if this year was the result, it still spelled bad news for a man who ran with "Make America Great Again" as a slogan. Beyond that, in 2016, I talked to a lot of people who said they weren't going to vote because they didn't want to have to choose between 2 corrupt politicians. But with things as dire as they've been, and lots of heated political crap between then and now, a lot of people who were on the fence got off the fence. And with mail-in voting being pushed as an alternative to standing in a line for an hour to fill in a few dots on a sheet of paper, more people felt compelled to vote. My mom hadn't voted in the last 5 elections, but she sure did this time. And you could ask why more of these new voters didn't go for Trump, but you have to consider that he started as a controversial figure who a lot of people considered abrasive and unpresidential, and after he came into office, I don't think he convinced many people otherwise. When people disagreed or contradicted him, his mildest responses were strong language and insults. His harshest responses could include accusations of conspiracy and criminality. He alienated whole swaths of the population, entire professions. He was openly hostile to any press that wasn't clearly positive towards him. I can understand liking someone who doesn't just smile at his enemies and then turn around and swear under his breath. But Trump still burned bridges. As for his performance in office, again trying to stay apolitical, he had a lot of pretty big controversies, many of which had people worried about the precedents his actions would set in the long term. And, like many presidents of the past, even a lot of his more positive actions didn't bear spectacularly, unambiguously positive results. Maybe history will be kind in some cases, but modern pundits, as is standard, won't. And honestly, Trump was involved in a lot of stuff that happened just in 2020 that was pretty damning. At a press conference talking about COVID response, he put out the idea of injecting stuff into your insides that don't belong on the inside. Then, when he was called out on it, declared he was just baiting the press with a joke. As though the president using a COVID response briefing as a chance for practical jokes was reassuring? A peaceful protest was violently scattered so he could pose in front of a church with an upside-down Bible. At a time when anger was boiling over onto the streets about police brutality and corruption, Trump had suggested police actually be rougher with people they're arresting. He underplayed the pandemic and refused to wear masks against the advice of all his medical advisors, then got COVID, and after receiving the best medical attention available to mankind, used the speedy recovery his privilege allowed him to downplay the virus. And of course, we have recordings of him admitting he knew about the virus a couple of months before he publicly claimed he found out about it. Altogether, none of these were great looks. So, in short, assuming that most people were going to be overwhelmingly in favor of a second term isn't really reasonable. I mean, it's kind of a recognized idea that politicians will try to play it safe in their first term to make a second term more likely. People against them will think they're not as extreme as they thought, while people for them will assume they do more in their second term. And say what you will for Trump, but he did not play it safe. Didn't come across as someone who was saving anything for the second lap. If I were Trump, I'd be pretty proud of getting nearly half the votes after a year like this. All of this, however, feels kind of beside the point. The election happened and Trump lost, and he claimed it was stolen. Voter fraud, dead voters, burned ballots, rigged machines, Hugo Chavez, etc. All of these ideas and more didn't come from intelligence agencies or whistleblowers. No pencil pushers looked at the numbers and said, "This doesn't look right. Let's see how deep this rabbit hole goes," before informing the president. This wasn't a case of evidence leading to the conclusion that the election was stolen. This was the conclusion that the election was stolen, leading to the need for evidence to back it up. And every possibility brought up was answered and dismissed unambiguously. The Trump team went to court 60 times, and every time they failed to bring any evidence of fraud that could be used in any court in the land. And every time someone, including and especially federal employees and organizations, reaffirmed that the election was legitimate, Trump would reject their findings and accuse them of incompetence, cowardice, and/or corruption. This includes a Supreme Court that is 1/3 his own hand-picked people. The sheer number of people who would have had to be actively conspiring against him at this point would be enough to vote him out of office all on their own. And we can't pretend this is in good faith. Trump has been warning about voter fraud and then claiming voter fraud for years. And I'm not talking presidential elections. When Ted Cruz won the Iowa caucus, he cried voter fraud. Now Ted, the only man on earth with less self-respect than Sean Spicer, is supporting Trump's claims. Has he been using his special cheater knowledge to ferret out the current conspirators? No, because he didn't cheat, and he hopes everyone will forget that he has every reason to doubt Trump's claims. And then Trump accused Clinton of voter fraud when she got the popular vote, and then proceeded to do nothing about it, because he knew it wasn't true and he got what he wanted. Seriously, if the president openly stated his belief that a huge act of treason had taken place, then made no effort to try to pursue it in the present or prevent it in the future, would that seem right? I mean, there are other elections, and if there was a group of conspirators at large, you'd want to stop them, right? Well, never mind, because Democrats weren't even doing good in elections. I guess the conspirators are really good at infiltration and secrecy, but not actually, getting the people they want in seats of power. Whoopsie. But no. The idea that any loss he experiences is an act of malice is useful to him. He's been suggesting it would happen this election for years, priming up his followers, and he has also been implying that he wouldn't agree to a smooth transition of power since the beginning of his term. Ask yourself if you could possibly imagine any scenario where, content that everything is as legitimate and foolproof as possible, Trump gracefully concedes. Do you really think that was ever in the cards? It was either win or whine for Trump. But then, if none of that scans, and you still think the election was stolen, there remains one fact that, as of right now, is undisputed. If the election was stolen, it was done so successfully. One and done, scot-free. Save discovering a huge cache of very good, unfalsifiable evidence, Biden will be president. Your feelings and convictions have no impact on the legal process. If you're worried about future voter fraud, you should look into and support measures to make elections more secure in the future. There's nothing more to be done now. Of course, I was moved to make this video in response to people who disagreed with that sentiment recently. The invasion of the Capitol building during the electoral vote certification by protesters / terrorists / insurrectionists wielding weapons and zip ties. This is why I'm worried. This is why I'm ready to potentially alienate my audience with unexpected political stuff. This is not normal, no. But more than that, it's not right. At the base of it, this is people angry that they lost an election, ready to tear down the government based on the unfounded suspicions of a transparently suspicious man. No one wants to hear this. But if you're still on board with Trump here, I say with sincerity and without malice that you might functionally be in a cult. You're willing to believe what Trump says even when every other source of information contradicts him. And the fact that so many people contradict him just affirms that he's right. He's built up and supported endless conspiracies to explain why it seems like he's wrong or lying. He uses slogans and chants to move crowds and encourages clothing and life practices that isolate you from non-believers, like dumb hats and anti-masking. Please read up on cults and some of their methods for keeping people in line. People don't get involved with cults because they're dumb or crazy. It's because they have needs, and some people know how to prey on them to their own advantage. So please don't, whatever you do, isolate yourself further from society. Trump recently got banned from most mainstream social media for inciting violence and has suggested he's going to move to other, more insulated platforms, or even start his own. Please don't follow him there. It could turn into the worst kind of echo chamber, with you only ever hearing what he wants you to hear, thinking what he wants you to think. He is a selfish, petty, angry little man who doesn't deserve your time and attention. Sorry this went on so long, but this is important.